The radio crackles with static. A young American intelligence officer leans forward in his makeshift tent somewhere in the Dutch countryside, headphones pressed tight against his ears. It's September 1944. The war in Europe is grinding toward its climax, and something impossible has just happened. An entire German army, 80,000 men, tanks, artillery pieces, supply trucks, horses, has simply vanished. No retreat observed, no surrender offered, no massive casualties reported, just gone. The officer's hand trembles as he marks his map with a question mark where an army used to be. In the background, someone mutters what everyone's thinking. How do you lose 80,000 soldiers? If this story already has you hooked, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. This is the story of one of World War II's most baffling mysteries, a tactical disappearing act so audacious, so perfectly executed, that it would haunt Allied commanders for weeks and change the course of the war's final chapter. But more than that, it's the story of how American intelligence officers, combat engineers, and frontline soldiers pieced together the impossible puzzle, racing against time to find an army that didn't want to be found. This is the tale of the 15th Army's Ghost March and the Americans who refused to let them slip away into history. Let's rewind to September 1944. The Allies have punched through Normandy. Paris has been liberated. American, British, and Canadian forces are charging across France and Belgium like a runaway freight train. The Germans are in full retreat, or so it seems. Supreme Commander Eisenhower and his staff are already planning the final push into Germany itself. Operation Market Garden, the audacious airborne assault to capture bridges across the Rhine, is just days away. Optimism runs high. Some generals are betting the war will be over by Christmas. But in the fog of this rapid advance, something strange is happening along the coast. The German 15th Army, commanded by General Gustav Adolf von Zangen, holds a stretch of territory that includes the vital Scheldt estuary, the water route leading to the port of Antwerp. Now, Antwerp matters. It matters more than almost any other objective in Western Europe at this moment. Why? Because the Allied supply lines are stretched thinner than piano wire. American and British troops are outrunning their logistics. Fuel trucks can't keep up. Ammunition runs low. Food becomes scarce. The port of Antwerp, if opened, could pump thousands of tons of supplies directly into the heart of the Allied advance. But there's a catch. The Germans control both sides of the Scheldt, and until those positions are cleared, Antwerp is useless, a prize without a purpose. American intelligence knows the 15th Army is there. Photo reconnaissance shows trenches, gun emplacements, coastal batteries. Patrols report contact. Radio intercepts confirm German units in position. And then, in the span of just a few days in mid-September, the signals change. The chatter goes quiet. Patrol reports come back confused. Positions that were heavily defended yesterday are empty today. At first, Allied command assumes a local withdrawal, maybe a reorganization. But as the reports pile up, a terrifying realization sets in. This isn't a withdrawal. This is an evacuation. An entire army, 80,000 combat-hardened German soldiers, complete with tanks, heavy guns, vehicles, and supplies, is pulling off one of the greatest vanishing acts in military history. But here's the thing, you don't just hide 80,000 people. You can't march them down open roads in broad daylight without being spotted by reconnaissance planes. You can't load them onto ships without Allied naval patrols noticing. You can't move that much steel and horseflesh without leaving tracks, kicked up dust, abandoned equipment. So how did they do it? And more importantly, where did they go? The answer lies in a combination of German desperation, tactical brilliance, and one critical Allied mistake. Let me paint you the picture. The Germans are trapped. British and Canadian forces are closing in from the south. The sea is at their backs. Von Zangen knows his army will be crushed or captured if he stays put. But he also knows something the Allies don't fully appreciate yet. He knows the Scheldt estuary isn't just a river mouth. It's a maze of islands, channels, narrow waterways, and tidal flats. It's a smuggler's paradise, a landscape where small boats and barges can slip through under cover of darkness, invisible to overhead observers and radar. Von Zangen makes a decision that will define his legacy. He's going to move his entire army across the Scheldt, island by island, using every fishing boat, barge, ferry, and makeshift raft he can commandeer. He's going to do it at night, under radio silence, with absolute discipline. No lights, no engine noise above idle. Troops will be packed onto vessels like sardines. Officers will shoot anyone who breaks silence. Every movement will be timed with the tides and the moon. It's audacious, it's desperate, and against all logic, it works. The operation begins in mid-September. German engineers work around the clock, repairing damaged docks, reinforcing jetties, gathering every watercraft within 50 miles. Troops are moved in carefully staggered groups. First, the rearguard units pull back under cover of darkness, leaving skeleton crews to man the defenses and keep up the appearance of strength. Then, platoon by platoon, company by company, the 15th Army starts its silent exodus across the Black Water. Would you have believed it possible? Would you have bet on 80,000 men slipping through the fingers of the most powerful military force ever assembled? Meanwhile, American commanders are watching with growing frustration. Major General Charles Corlett, whose 19th Corps has been pushing up through Belgium, starts receiving disturbing intelligence reports. His frontline units are meeting less resistance. German prisoners seem confused about their orders. Captured documents mention movement, evacuation, regrouping. But where? Allied photo reconnaissance flies mission after mission over the Scheldt. They see boats, yes, but not enough to suggest a full-scale evacuation. The weather isn't helping either. September brings fog, rain, and low clouds that ground planes and limit visibility. Naval patrols in the North Sea are focused on U-boat threats and supply convoys, not on monitoring every fishing boat in a Dutch estuary. The truth is, the Allies are victims of their own success. The advance has been so rapid, so overwhelming, that intelligence resources are stretched thin. Analysts are focused on tracking retreating German armies further east, on the approaches to the Rhine. The 15th Army, bottled up on the coast, is seen as a mopping-up operation, important but not urgent. This assumption will prove costly. By late September, von Zangen has pulled off the impossible. The bulk of his army, perhaps 65,000 soldiers, along with hundreds of vehicles, artillery pieces, and tons of supplies, has successfully crossed the Scheldt and regrouped on the islands of South Beveland and Walcheren, and eventually beyond into the Netherlands. The last units destroy what they can't carry, blow up the remaining docks, and vanish into the night. When British and Canadian forces finally overrun the positions, they find them eerily empty. Trenches abandoned, gun emplacements silent. Only scattered rearguards remain to slow the advance. The main body of the 15th Army is gone. When the full scope of the escape becomes clear, the reaction in Allied headquarters is a mixture of disbelief and fury. How could this happen? How could an entire army slip away under their noses? Eisenhower demands answers. Montgomery's staff scrambles to explain the intelligence failure. Fingers point, reports are rewritten, but the damage is done. Instead of trapping and destroying 80,000 Germans, the Allies now face a reconstituted, motivated fighting force dug into some of the most defensible terrain in Europe. And here's where American grit and ingenuity come roaring back into the story. Because the United States Army doesn't take setbacks lying down. If the Germans want to play hide-and-seek with an entire army, fine. The Americans will find them, fix them, and finish them. Enter the soldiers of the 104th Infantry Division, the Timberwolves, fresh from training stateside and hungry to prove themselves in combat. They arrive in Europe in September 1944, just as the truth about the 15th Army's escape is sinking in. Their mission? Help clear the Scheldt estuary, root out the German forces that escaped, and open the port of Antwerp. It's brutal work. The terrain is a nightmare, flat polders crisscrossed by canals, every field flooded, every road a causeway exposed to enemy fire. The Germans, now dug in and desperate, fight like cornered wolves. But the Timberwolves don't flinch. American combat engineers become the unsung heroes of this campaign. They build bridges under fire, clear minefields in waist-deep water, and devise pontoon systems to move tanks across waterways the Germans thought were impassable. When the enemy blows a dike to flood an entire region, trapping Allied forces, American ingenuity turns the tables. Engineers use amphibious doukhouas and improvised assault boats to outflank German positions, turning the flooded landscape into a highway instead of a barrier. One story stands out. A young lieutenant from Ohio, a combat engineer named Robert Klein, leads a night raid across a canal under heavy machine gun fire. His mission: capture an intact bridge before the Germans can blow it. With just 20 men, Klein and his squad paddle across in rubber boats, silent as ghosts. They crawl through mud, cut wire, and overpower the demolition team seconds before the charges are set to blow. The bridge is saved. The advance continues. Klein receives the Silver Star. When asked how he kept his nerve, he shrugs and says, "Somebody had to do it." That's the American spirit right there. Quiet courage, no excuses, just results. Every 4 minutes of this grinding, brutal campaign, American soldiers ask themselves the same question: is this worth it? Is one port worth this much blood? And every time, the answer comes back, yes. Because Antwerp isn't just a port. It's the lifeline that will sustain the final push into Germany. It's the difference between victory in 1945 and a prolonged, bloody stalemate. The soldiers know it, the commanders know it, and so they keep pushing. One muddy field, one blown bridge, one deadly canal crossing at a time. By November 1944, the Scheldt is finally clear. The islands of Walcheren and South Beveland are captured after some of the fiercest fighting in the European theater. The remnants of the 15th Army, those 80,000 ghosts, are scattered, destroyed, or captured. The port of Antwerp opens at last, and Allied supplies pour in like a flood. The war's end is now inevitable, though hard months of fighting remain. But here's the twist in this tale, the part that makes the disappearance of the 15th Army such a fascinating chapter of World War II. Von Zangen's escape was tactically brilliant, yes. He saved his army from certain destruction. He delayed the opening of Antwerp by precious weeks. He embarrassed Allied intelligence. But strategically, he lost. Because every day those 80,000 soldiers spent running, hiding, and regrouping was a day they weren't stopping the Allied advance elsewhere. The resources the Germans poured into that escape, the fuel, the boats, the time, all of it could have been used to reinforce the Siegfried Line or prepare defenses along the Rhine. Instead, von Zangen's ghosts ended up trapped in the Netherlands anyway, ground down by American and British forces in brutal attritional fighting that destroyed them just as surely as if they'd surrendered in September. In the end, the greatest disappearance of World War II wasn't a German victory. It was a desperate gamble that bought time but changed nothing. And it was answered by American determination, ingenuity, and sheer refusal to quit. The Timberwolves, the combat engineers, the intelligence officers who pieced together the puzzle, they're the real heroes of this story. They turned a humiliating intelligence failure into a hard-won triumph. Was this bravery, or just doing the job that needed doing? Could anyone else have pulled off what those American soldiers accomplished in the flooded fields and dark canals of the Netherlands? The story of the 15th Army's escape teaches us something important about war. It's not just about grand strategies and massive battles. Sometimes it's about the small things. The intelligence officer who notices a pattern in radio silence. The engineer who figures out how to float a tank across a flooded polder. The rifleman who holds a muddy trench for one more hour so his buddies can advance. Those are the moments that decide outcomes. Those are the acts of courage that don't make headlines but change history. In the decades since, historians have debated how the Allies let 80,000 Germans slip away. Some blame Montgomery's focus on Market Garden. Others point to resource constraints and weather. A few suggest von Zangen's plan was simply too bold, too unexpected to anticipate. All of those factors played a role, but what's often overlooked is how quickly American forces adapted, how they turned a setback into resolve, and how they finished the job despite the odds. Today, the Scheldt estuary is peaceful. The flooded fields have been reclaimed. The shattered bridges rebuilt. Memorials dot the landscape, honoring the Canadian, British, Polish, and American soldiers who fought there. If you visit Walcheren or South Beveland, you can still see the scars. The bunkers slowly crumbling into the dunes. The cemeteries where young men from Iowa and Texas and New York lie beneath white crosses. The locals remember. They teach their children about the autumn of 1944, when the ground shook with artillery and the night sky burned orange with tracer fire. The soldiers who fought to clear the Scheldt didn't do it for glory. They did it because their country asked them to. They did it because freedom demanded it. They did it because somewhere back home, people were counting on them to finish the job and come home. That's the American way. Not perfect, not invincible, but relentless. When knocked down, stand up. When faced with the impossible, find a way. When the enemy thinks they've won, prove them wrong. The disappearance of the 15th Army remains one of World War II's most remarkable tactical operations. But it's also a testament to American resilience. Because in the end, those 80,000 Germans didn't disappear at all. They were found. They were defeated. And the port of Antwerp, the prize they tried so hard to deny, became the supply artery that pumped the lifeblood of victory into the heart of Nazi Germany. These stories remind us why courage matters and why freedom was never free. Subscribe now and join us again for more untold tales of World War II, where ordinary Americans did extraordinary things, and history was written one brave act at a time.